Welcome everyone to this briefing brought to you by the Israel Defense and Security Forum, IDSF. In Hebrew, name is Bitonistim. IDSF is the leading Israeli organization advocating for strong national security-oriented policies to guide the state of Israel. Thank you, of course, to all of our viewers and supporters for tuning in to this briefing to allow us to really bring you behind the headlines of what is happening in Israel. I'm in a bit of a different location than usual. I'm in Gush Etzion right now. Hopefully the audio and video is decent, and we'll have a important 30 minutes together. I'm very pleased to be joined right now by Lieutenant Colonel Maurice Hirsch, who is the director of the Initiative for the Palestinian Authority Accountability and Reform in the Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs and a senior legal analyst at Human Rights Voices. He served for 19 years in the IDF Military Advocate General Corps. In his last position, he served as the director of the military prosecution in Judea and Samaria, and he is, of course, a member of IDSF. Maurice, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me again.
Absolutely. We have a lot to discuss because yesterday there was a law passed here in Israel allowing Israeli victims of terror to sue the Palestinian Authority for compensation. You had a very large role to play in that whole legal process. So first of all, thank you so much for doing that. But please, can you share with our audience what happened yesterday and what the meaning of it is?
So basically, the law that was passed it was actually 2 nights ago, says something, has a few different ingredients. The number one is that it provides for the courts to award what's called exemplary damages to the victims of terror. Exemplary damages are damages which aren't necessarily connected to any type of damage that's been caused, but rather they're there to award a sum of money to the person who's been affected, in this case, victims of terror, by an action which society wants to throw out, society wants to get rid of. It's generally used for things like all types of building companies who want to make and maximize, obviously, their profits. But at the end of the day, they cut all types of safety measures. And so people possibly die on building sites because it's profitable for the builders. So the courts come along and say, in those cases, we're going to impose on you exemplary damages, which are these like really very high damages, which are there to be more of a deterrent than they are anything of a compensation. Secondly, it says that if you have this instance where you have an organization that is a terror rewarder, so that terror rewarder will be subject to these exemplary damages if they are found to be culpable for the terror attack. Now, what is the terror rewarder? The terror rewarder is an organization, a body that by its laws, its regulations, and by its general instructions systematically pays salaries and rewards terrorists. That is, for all intents and purposes, the Palestinian Authority. It has a law that it passed in 2004 that guarantees every terrorist, including murderers, a salary for life. Really a huge salary, which is disproportionate entirely to the rest of the wages paid in the workforce of the Palestinian Authority, to ensure that it really does pay to be a terrorist. It pays to murder Jews. So the law provides that the victims of terror can sue this terror rewarder, and they will be awarded damages at different levels. Firstly, 10 million shekel, about $2.7 million for every person that's murdered, and 5 million shekel, about $1.375 million for any person who suffers any type of disability. That money will then be taken, once it's been awarded, from the funds that Israel has been freezing for the last 6 years as a result of this continuous payment of salaries to terrorists by the Palestinian Authority. So really what we're trying to do is to implement a very, very simple slogan, which we set for this law at the beginning: compensate the victims and not the terrorists. Send a message to the terrorists that it's unacceptable that you are involved in terror whatsoever, And it's even more unacceptable that there's someone who will pay a price, who will pay a reward for murdering Jews. And anyone who does so will be held accountable and will have to pay very substantial damages to the victims of terror.
What is the process now? Do individual families need to open a lawsuit? How does that work?
Yeah, so now what needs to happen is that the individual families of the victims of terror need to submit lawsuits against the Palestinian Authority or against the PLO or both of them together and really make the simple claim, our loved one was killed or I suffered some type of a disability because of an act of terror. You are paying a salary to the terrorist who attacked me, murdered my loved ones, and therefore you are responsible for his actions, and therefore I demand the damages. When the court sees that, what we added into the law as well is that the victims will not have to prove that every single terrorist is receiving a salary, but rather that there is a broad presumption of these payments based on the practices of the Palestinian Authority. What we tried to do is really get rid of as many obstacles as possible and to ensure that really the terrorists and their supporters are held accountable to the greatest degree possible with as little onus on the victims of terror as really could be tolerated.
So tragically, there have been terrorist attacks in Israel for many, many, many years. So if a family from 30, 40 years ago is still suffering the repercussions of an attack, can they bring their case to the courts right now?
No, so the law doesn't reinvent the rules of the statute of limitations. Unfortunately, it's impossible to add on all types of different things that we needed to change into just one law. It was important to set the exemplary damages. It's the first time that the idea, the notion of exemplary damages was even entrenched in law in Israel. We wanted to set the high level of the damages, and we wanted to ensure that there was already this presumption of payment. To then go about changing the statute of limitations would have added another hurdle onto the law and would possibly, at the end of the day, cause the law either not to pass at all or to fall at later judicial review. So at the moment, the law applies only to instances of terror that go back 7 years. That's the statute of limitations in Israel. And for any case that is already pending before the court. So obviously, victims of terror from the terror war started by the PA in September 2000, many of them have already submitted lawsuits against the PA. And those lawsuits will come under the umbrella of the law, even if they were submitted 10 and 15 years ago, and the PA has been dragging its heels and really dragging the guts out of the victims of terror with these lawsuits for many, many years. Now they're going to find out that they couldn't, that what they were trying to do, to use and abuse the Israeli court system to again inflict pain and suffering on the victims of terror, is now going to be something which explodes in their face.
So who is the defendant, so to speak, in this case? It's the Israeli terror victims suing the Palestinian Authority, or they're suing the individual terrorists? The authority, meaning, how does this case go forward? Who's represented, so to speak?
Well, so the individual families sue the Palestinian Authority. There was a case law decided by the Supreme Court now almost 3 years ago that provides a very, very simple idea. If you pay a salary to a terrorist, you then really adopt his actions. You confirm that he was acting upon your agency. And that really creates this level of responsibility, legal responsibility for the actions of the terrorists. Now, if the PA doesn't want to be responsible for the actions of the terrorists, All it has to do, it's very simple, stop paying salaries to terrorists. Unfortunately, the PA is completely committed to paying salaries to terrorists. They see no moral really turpitude with this idea of paying salaries, putting a value on the life of a Jew. They're happy, they're proud of their practices. As Mahmoud Abbas has said time and time again, if the PA just has one penny left in its coffers, it will pay them first to the terrorists. And so now the victims must sue the PA and ensure that they pay very heavily for their entire involvement in terrorism and their promotion of terrorism, their rewarding of terrorism. This is something which has been going on for 30 years. And now we're taking another step forward to making the terrorists pay.
And I think you said 10 million shekel per victim, if I heard correctly. How much money is available right now being frozen, so to speak, by Israel that would then be available for these lawsuits?
So at the moment, the escrow account of the frozen funds has already in it some 3 billion shekel, and hopefully within the next few days, the Israeli government will implement the law, the freeze law again regarding the PA payments for last year, for 2023, and thereby add somewhere in the region of 600 to 650 million shekel onto that escrow account. So really there is quite a substantial amount of money to go around, and we hope that that will be enough, even at this stage, to compensate the victims.
Okay, and thank you to all of our viewers for sending in the questions. One important question coming in is, what was the origin of that 3 billion or now 3.5 billion shekel that's frozen? Where did that money start? That's Israeli money, that's US money, where is that?
So what happened was, as a part of the Oslo Accords back in 1993, and then the Paris Agreement, as it's commonly known, in 1994, Israel agreed to waive a number of taxes that it used to collect, and it used to go into the Israeli treasury, to waive those taxes on behalf of this new Palestinian entity, the Palestinian Authority, so it would be able to function. Whilst the PLO have breached every single provision of the Oslo Accords, Israel has continued on to collect those tax monies and to transfer them over to the Palestinian Authority. We're talking about somewhere in the region of 11 to 12 billion shekel every single year. And so what happened was that in 2018, Israel passed the freeze law, which said that out of that tax money, we're going to deduct the sum equivalent to the payments of the PA to the terrorists in the year previous. So in 2018, for example, the PA paid to terrorists 650 million shekels, some 150 to 175 million dollars. That sum was then deducted from that tax income the next year. Moshe, have I lost you? So in the meantime, I don't know if anyone can still hear me, but really what's happened ever since then, since 2019, since the law was first implemented, there have been a number of additional decisions to implement the law, each time with a sum just about 600 to 650 million shekels. So that is what has come in and is sitting in that escrow account. It isn't international aid. This is money that was Israel's. Israel gave it to the Palestinian Authority to function and to teach peace, to fight terrorism, to fight incitement. And instead of using that money in a constructive way to promote peace, the PA has been literally using the money that we give them in order to pay financial rewards to the terrorists who murder our children, who murder our loved ones. And that's the situation that we've been living in really for the last 30 years. This idea of, well, what happened to the Oslo Accords? Why didn't anyone really say, well, this is unacceptable anymore? This is something that needs to stop. This is something that that really cannot be reconciled with anything that even gets close to basic morality, then that's something which unfortunately Israel has been keeping up its side of the bargain, because this is the money that really, without it, the PA cannot really function. The money that Israel collects and transfers to the PA is something anywhere between 65 to 70, 72% of the PA's annual budget. So really, without that money, the Palestinian Authority cannot function. This is something which I personally have been advocating for many, many years, to say to them, well, either the PA has to choose. You either want to choose life and peace and get money, or you want to choose terrorism and death and rewarding terrorists. And therefore, Israel shouldn't be providing any of that money to the Palestinian Authority. Now, that's something which obviously is a difficulty. Israel, to a certain extent, this is it's called the October 6th conception or misconception, really, that the Palestinian Authority is good for Israel's security. Well, the truth of the matter is, the Palestinian Authority is probably the worst thing in the world for Israel's security. These are the organization that teaches generation after generation after generation of Palestinians to hate Israel, to hate Israelis, to want to kill Israelis, to undermine the basic right of Israel to exist. It then rewards terrorists. It incites murder. It chases after Israel and IDF soldiers in the international forums, in the UN. This is the Palestinian Authority. When you look at the Nukhba terrorists, the Hamas terrorists who swarmed Israel on the 7th of October and carried out those really heinous massacres, these were not children under the age of 16. Now, why do I say under the age of 16? Because Hamas took control of the Gaza Strip in 2007. So those terrorists, if they were only educated by Hamas, would be under 16 years old. Now, the fact of the matter is those terrorists were over 25, over 30. They were terrorists who were predominantly educated on the school system of the Palestinian Authority. It's the same curriculum that's adopted by UNRWA as well. And together, the Palestinian Authority, Hamas, and UNRWA indoctrinated, brainwashed millions of Palestinians and brought them to the point where they can get up in the morning, they can swarm Israel's border and behead babies, rape women, murder people, torture people, take hostages. This is the moral depravity that has been caused by that education system. And that's something, obviously, which the PA is entirely responsible for. This is not something that is only placed on Hamas's head, but more so on the head of the Palestinian Authority. And yet we still have the voices within Israel's security establishment that say, well, what are we going to do if we don't have the Palestinian Authority? And the answer is very simple. Firstly, we might actually be able to cut down on terrorism. I know that it isn't easy to discuss a reality after all we've really been conditioned to know and see for the last 30 years is the Palestinian Authority. That's all we've really, for many generations, grown up on already. So how can it possibly be a thought that we will find something else? Well, the answer is we must, because the Palestinian Authority has proved to be the most lethal, truly the most lethal weapon against the Jewish people since the Holocaust. More people have been murdered by Palestinian terrorism since the creation of the Palestinian Authority than ever before. This is a statistic which everybody should know. This is the result of that terrorism, and that was correct even before the 7th of October. It is now really been made more and more and more clear that that is the situation, and that we're dealing with an organization that doesn't want peace. The Palestinian Authority is set on Israel's destruction. That's what they want. That when people, for example, talk about this idea of a two-state solution, it's a utopian idea, because really the Palestinians don't want a two-state solution. They want a one-state solution in which no Jews will be allowed to live. So when you talk about this two-state solution, when President Biden talks about the two-state solution, the question that should be asked is, what are the guiding principles of that state going to be? Is it going to be a state that can condemn the October 7 massacre, which Mahmoud Abbas and none of the current leadership of the Palestinian Authority have ever done? Is it going to be an institution that has a law that literally pays financial rewards for the murders of Jews? Is that something that we should tolerate? So if you're talking about this idea of a two-state solution in the future, well, the start should be cancel the pay-for-slay policy already now. Is that future state going to incite murder of Jews? If not, if they're going to be accepting of the right of Israel to exist, the right of Jews to live in their ancestral homeland, and to have their nation state, well, then that should be already recognized now. What are the principles of the state going to be? That's the question that needs to be asked. And to put that mirror already to anyone who says, well, they're going to be a peace-loving state that's really free of any weapons and free of the desire to murder Jews. Unfortunately, there is no basis for that argument. There is no basis for even the assumption that that's the type of a state that will be created, in which all of the terrorists together have now come to this realization that Jews also have a right to live, that Jews have the right to their nation state. So that's really the situation that we're talking about. And in the meantime, Israel, unfortunately, continues on to provide all of this financial support to the Palestinian Authority, almost entirely in fear of ever getting to the situation where we need to clearly declare that the Oslo Accord is dead. And really that's the reality. The Oslo Accords have been killed by the Palestinians many, many years ago. This idea that there is a Palestinian Authority. Well, what does that mean there's a Palestinian Authority? Palestinian Authority was meant to be a body that controls both Judea and Samaria and the Gaza Strip. So they haven't done that for a very, very, very long time. For the very latest, for 16 years, since Hamas seized power of Hamas, really there is no idea of this unified entity. It was meant to be an entity in which there are freedom, where there's democracy. And really there isn't any democracy. There haven't been elections in the Palestinian Authority for the last almost 20 years. Mahmoud Abbas is now in his 20th year of his first 4-year term. Think about what would happen, for example, if someone were to say, well, I refuse to leave office after my first 4-year term. I'm going to seize the leadership even without elections. That's really what Mahmoud Abbas has done. He called the first elections in 2005 and has just stayed in power ever since. Anytime he thought of having elections for the PA Parliament and he realized, well, Hamas will win again, he decided to cancel the elections. When you look at this in its entirety, the PA no longer exists. What you have is Hamastan in the Gaza Strip, or what was Hamastan in the Gaza Strip until the war, and Fatah land, Mahmoud Abbas's Fatah party that controls the remnants of the Palestinian Authority in Judea and Samaria. So you don't really have this Palestinian Authority. It never fulfilled its very, very basic commitments to fight terrorism and promote peace. And really, as we go forward, even the Palestinian people are rejecting the Palestinian Authority. Most of the Palestinian people now believe that the Palestinian Authority is a burden on the Palestinian people rather than an asset. Most of the Palestinians would choose and democratically elect Hamas again, the terrorists who carried out the massacre. Most of the Palestinian people, which is particularly pertinent for the new law as well, support the payments to terrorists, even though they know that those payments have now cost them billions of dollars, literally. They've lost since 2018 the direct US aid to the Palestinian Authority, which is about $250 million a year. So if you do a quick calculation, 6 years, it's now $1.5 billion. They've lost the 3 million shekel that Israel has deducted. They've lost all of the aid that was coming from other countries around the world. At one stage, between 2011 and 2021, which is really the period where the pay-for-slave policy was really exposed, they also lost 90% of their international aid. So really, they've lost a tremendous amount of money just because they pay salaries to terrorists. But nonetheless, the leadership is committed to paying the salaries to terrorists, and the people support that idea. Now, the question is, I apologize that I'm talking all through, and I'm trying to maybe see some of the questions along the way where Moshe would have intervened. The question is really what to do with this situation. Will there come about a Palestinian leader who is capable of abolishing these payments? I mean, that's really the question that needs to be asked.
Lieutenant Colonel Maurice Hirsch, thank you. Thank you for sharing all of this. There's so much more to dissect and discuss. I feel like we're going to have you back to really go forward with this and understand how it's going to affect the PA, how it will impact the victims. But thank you for your work in making this pass. We all have a debt of gratitude to you. So thank you. Thank you, of course, to all of our viewers and supporters who are tuning in right now. And we will be back with you tomorrow, 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Until then, stay safe, stay strong. Take care, everyone.
Thank you for having me.